turned with his fist closed. Killy looked at it, then at him. One eyebrow lifted with the precise degree of inquiry she applied to things that interested her. What's that? Close your eyes. She looked at him a moment longer, assessing, faintly amused, and then closed them. And Frank looked at her. He had not meant to look at her the way he looked at her now. He had not planned it. It arrived with the helpless quality of a truth that has been waiting for the moment of least resistance. In the lamplight, her face was arranged in the unself-consciousness of someone with their eyes closed. All the small and habitual calibrations of expression resting. The face simply being rather than presenting. And it was the face of someone he knew. Not Everest's face. Not anymore. He had crossed some unmarked threshold in recent weeks and arrived somewhere on the other side of that confusion. And what he found there was this. A face that had its own history in him now. Its own accumulating record of known moments. The way it looked concentrating over a fieldwork report. The way it looked when a bad joke landed. The way it looked in the morning before it had fully committed to being awake. The way it looked right now. Patient and trusting with her eyes closed. The lamplight finding the planes of her cheekbones, her hands folded in her lap, the copper mobile turning in the peripheral dark of the kitchen doorway. He felt something in his chest that he did not immediately have a name for. Gratitude, partly, but gratitude was too tame for it. Something that was gratitude, the way an ocean is water, technically accurate and completely insufficient. She had asked no questions the night he arrived with his bag. She had fed him and given him a room and let him be the shape he needed to be without requiring him to explain or justify or perform that shape for her. She had listened to things he hadn't told his wife, not because he trusted Killy more than Everest, but because she received information without adding weight to it. And there were things he was carrying that couldn't bear more weight. She had passed him the olive oil. She had been wrong about the ceramic glazing on episode 4 and graciously conceded the point. She had given him, in the middle of a season of his life that had felt like a series of rooms with bad air, something that breathed. He opened his palm. Okay, he said, look. The stone sat in the cup of his hand like a held breath. It was almost a perfect ellipse, egg smooth, the surface carrying a glassy quality that spoke of long negotiation between mineral and water, time working the edges into their current argument for perfection. Its pattern was its own private language. Bands of pale amber and deep rust interrupted by a vein of something almost translucent, running its full length like a sentence through a paragraph. Killy looked at it. Then she looked at it properly. Frank. Her voice had changed registers entirely. I don't know what kind it is, he said. I found it at the pump housing on the north edge of the course. There was a whole dry creek bed out there, buried under the maintenance track. This was just sitting on top. She lifted it from his palm with both hands, the way she handled all her stones. Not reverently, exactly, but correctly. The attentiveness of someone who understands they are holding a thing that took longer to make than human history. This is a chert nodule, she said quietly. The banding is, Frank, this is beautiful. This is genuinely beautiful. She turned it in the lamplight, and the translucent vein caught the amber and briefly, strangely glowed. Where exactly was the pump housing? I can take you, he said. She smiled at the stone a moment longer before announcing, I'd like that. She made a sound that was not quite a word, and then her arms were around him. Not the polite hug of the doorway on his arrival. Something fuller, both arms finding his shoulders, her face and his neck, her warmth radiating outward in a way that was immediate and real. The warmth of a person who is genuinely, uncomplicatedly happy, and the happiness physical, present, undeniable. He could smell her hair, something light and clean, and underneath it, something warmer, something that was simply her, particular and irreducible. He held his arms open at his sides for a moment, as though unsure of the protocol. Then he put them around her. When she released him, it was unhurried. She leaned back and looked at the stone again, and then looked at him. And the look was direct and unguarded, and the gratitude in it was raw, in the way only real things are raw, without polish or presentation, just the thing itself. Thank you, she said. Just that. 2 words in her voice, which was low and precise, and meant everything it said. Frank felt something move through him. He had been happy before. He knew what happiness was. The ordinary, functional happiness of a life going more right than wrong, of work that mattered, of a marriage he valued. He had held that happiness and called it enough and believed himself. But this was a different frequency entirely. This was something that started in the sternum and moved outward. Something that brightened the specific quality of the lamplight and made the copper mobile's slow turning seem significant. Something that had no practical purpose and apologized for none. He thought of embers, how they can survive a long time in apparent darkness, banked and patient, and how, given the right breath of oxygen, they do not simply reignite, but bloom, the heat finding fuel it didn't know it had, the glow moving outward from the center in rings, illuminating things that had been sitting in the dark all along, waiting to be seen. He had not known the world could look so bright. He had not known that was something available to him. They returned to the show. Killy held the stone in one hand for the rest of the episode, turning it occasionally the way you turn something you haven't finished understanding. Frank sat beside her and watched the ceramics and felt the warmth of the room and the warmth of what had just passed between them, and thought, I absolutely love making her happy. Not with analysis, not with qualification, just a simple circular fact of it settling into him like water finding its level. She left for the shower when the episode ended. Frank cleaned the kitchen. He moved through it with a lightness he recognized as the physical residue of a good evening. Rinsing the plates, wiping the counter. The copper mobile turning in the doorway above him. His mind was quiet in the way it was quiet after a system ran correctly. The specific, settled quality of things in their right places. Pressure distributed evenly. No anomalies in the output. He went to his room. He undressed, unhurried, unbothered. The small domestic ritual of the end of the day. He thought about the chert nodule and where the creek bed ran, and whether there was more out there. He thought about Terence and the pressure readings for the morning. He thought about calling Everest and what he would tell her, and that he was glad, genuinely glad, that he felt better enough to make it a real conversation rather than a managed one. He left for the passage and opened the bathroom door. The world rearranged itself. It rearranged itself in the single second it took for his eyes to resolve what they were seeing. And in that second, every ambient thought, the creek bed, the pressure readings, Terence, Everest, the copper mobile, left the building entirely. Killy stood at the bathroom sink with a toothbrush in her hand, and she was completely and entirely and devastatingly herself. Unoccluded, the lamplight of the small bathroom casting her in amber that found every line of her with an artist's terrible precision. She turned at the sound of the door. Their eyes met. Neither of them moved. Frank had in his life seen things that qualified by any measure as beautiful. The central valley in the long cold hour before the heat arrived. The pressure maps of a well-designed system running at capacity. Everest's face across a seminar room in a building in Fresno. 7 years and an entire lifetime ago. He had collected beauty The way Killy collected stones without a system, just recognizing things as he moved through the world and holding the memory. But he had never seen anything like this. Not because of the obvious and undeniable fact of her, though that was present and real and requiring of every discipline he had, but because of what accompanied it, the full accumulated weight of everything she had already become to him in this apartment, in this kitchen, on this couch. The geology textbooks and the Cyrillic paperback, the tea ritual and the miso that failed, and the chert nodule glowing in the lamplight, the arms around his shoulders, and the thank you in her voice that was real and raw. All of it arriving simultaneously, colliding with the present moment with a force that was less like attraction and more like recognition, as though the universe was showing him something it had been holding in reserve, as though it was asking him to look. He looked. She did not look away. The toothbrush lowered. The air in the small bathroom had changed its properties entirely. He was aware of his own heartbeat in a way that was almost clinical, aware of the distance between them, which was not very much distance, aware of the warmth that crossed that distance and arrived at him, specific and radiating, particular to her. Her eyes held his, and what was in them was not embarrassment. It was something quieter and more irrevocable than embarrassment. Something that had, he understood, been building its case patiently in the kitchen and on the couch and in the corridor and at the countertop for weeks, and had been waiting for an unguarded moment to present its evidence. This, it said, this is what this is. They both took a step. He could feel her warmth now, the specific thermal radius of another body close enough to touch, and every fiber of him wanted to with a completeness that had no gaps in it, no ambivalence, no committee deliberating in the background, just the unanimous cellular insistence of a body that has identified the thing it wants to move toward. And her eyes held the same thing. He could see it, not a question, a mirror. Something new had entered the world in this bathroom at this specific moment in time. Something that had never existed before and might never exist again. Composed entirely of these two people in this particular light and these particular weeks, irreproducible and iridescent, and theirs. Had he been moving toward this without knowing it? Had the whole elaborate choreography of displacement and family and Henderson and the third floor been the world rooting him with its usual oblique methodology toward this bathroom, this amber light, this woman with his wife's bones, and her own irreducible soul? Was this? Her hand rose. She placed it on his chest, flat palm. His heartbeat met her hand immediately, as though it had been waiting at the door. She felt it. He watched her feel it. Her eyes dropped to her own hand, and then came back to his face. And what was in them was not a decision, but an honoring of something that had already been decided at a level neither of them had been consulted on. The hand moved gently, the smallest, most deliberate pressure, a gesture so quiet it could only be heard in complete silence, which is what he was inside. He stepped backward. One step. The hand remained in contact until the distance made it impossible. He did not remember deciding to step back. He did not remember the steps between the middle of the bathroom and the threshold. He came to himself, standing in the doorway, with his hand on the door's edge, and the air between them still warm. Her eyes had not changed. He pulled the door closed, slowly. The way you close something you are not certain about closing. The click of the latch was the loudest sound he had ever heard. He stood in the corridor. His body was burning. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Burning. His hands were unsteady, and his pulse was a structural event, and the corridor was both very small and very large, and he stood in it and breathed and waited for some part of his mind to arrive with authority and take charge of proceedings. No part arrived. He went to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed. He stood up. He opened the bag that had been living open on the chair, that had unpacked itself into this room incrementally. His boots under the bed, his work shirts on the hook, his irrigation notes on the nightstand, the small and daily archaeology of a life making itself at home. He began packing. His hands moved fast. A shirt, the boots, the notes. He did it with the focused velocity of a man acting before he can be talked out of acting, before the other argument assembles itself, before the warmth of the corridor reasserts its evidence. He dressed. He stood at the door with the bag on his shoulder. He made it to the kitchen. He stopped. He stood there for a moment in the dark of the kitchen, with the copper mobile above the doorway, turning its slow, imperceptible turn. Then he set the bag down and walked back down the corridor and placed his palm flat against the bathroom door. The wood was cool under his hand. He had no speech prepared. He was not a man who operated without preparation, and the absence of it felt like standing on a surface whose load capacity he hadn't calculated. He stood against the door, and the door stood between them, and he pressed his palm to it as though it was something to hold on to, or something to hold. Killy. His voice was low, barely above nothing. A pause. Then, from the other side, close, barely a door's width away, her voice, as quiet as his. "I know," she said, the word "no" carrying everything, the inventory of it. This is. He stopped, started again. This is something I've never felt. I want you to know I'm not dismissing it. I'm not calling it nothing. A pause. The door between them. "It isn't nothing," she said. "It's the furthest thing from nothing I've ever stood next to." Then you feel, Frank, a breath. I have been trying to classify this for weeks, and I am a scientist, and I cannot classify it. I have no. Her voice caught once, recovered. I have no instrument for this. He pressed his forehead against the wood. "I think," he said slowly, "that this exists as a real thing. I think it is real, and I think it is rare. I think it is the kind of thing people spend whole lives not finding." He paused. "I think it belongs to a different timeline. I think there's a version of this world in which we were the thing we almost just don't," she said softly. "Not harshly, just the measured mercy of someone who knows that sentence completed becomes a wound you carry. Silence. How much more is there? He said. Not quite a question. The shape of one, the weight of something else. From the other side, barely audible. I think the whole rest of a life, she said. I think immeasurable more. The copper mobile turned above the doorway. The Henderson night pressed against the windows. The door stays, she said, and her voice had changed, arrived somewhere firm and true. The tone of someone who has made a decision at great personal cost and is making it clearly so it cannot be unmade. Whatever this is, whatever it could be, the door stays between us, always. Yes, he said. Promise me. Yes. A silence long enough to be its own chapter. Then we need distance, Frank. Her voice was very close. He could feel it through the wood. As much as possible. You understand why? Yes, he said. That's why I'm leaving, he said. Tonight, I'm going back to California. The silence that followed was the complete and total silence of a person receiving something they knew was right and had hoped would not come. He waited. She didn't answer. He picked the bag up off the floor. He walked to the front door and opened it, and the Nevada night came in. Warm and enormous and indifferent. The stars doing their ancient and unhelpful work above the city. Frank walked out. The door closed behind